What's up everyone? I hope you're having a great day. My name is Josh, and in today's video we're going to be talking about this little beauty right here. This is the Fuji XH1, and if you want to know how good it is in 2021 for professional work, keep on watching. Basically, I'm trying to help those who are looking to get the best bang for their buck, and I think that this camera offers so much for the price. So I'll just give you a few specs about why the Fuji XH1 is such a strong contender even in 2021. Reason number one would be ergonomics. This camera, I don't know if you can tell, but this camera actually has a great grip on it. It's nice and chunky. I have the battery grip on it right now, and that is actually one of the awesome things about this camera. When this camera was released, unlike the Fuji X-T3, a few of the features were actually locked behind having to have this grip. So if you wanted to be able to use a headphone jack, and if you wanted to get some of the other features, some of the longer recording features, you had to have the battery grip. It's got a really nice top display on it. It has a really awesome shutter if you're into just the way a shutter feels. I think this has the best shutter of any Fuji camera. I also like that this design is a little bit more kind of like a DSLR. It also features a flip out screen similar to the X-T2 and the X-T3. It flips forward and backwards, and it also has this really cool flip out screen that only Fuji cameras have that will allow you to shoot vertically and not have to get down on the ground to be able to shoot vertically, which I think is amazing. I honestly think it might be a big reason why a lot of people pick Fuji for environmental shots. When we first started out, we were shooting photography, and then we actually kind of fell in love with videography, and that's where our focus is now. So that's where I'm going to put my focus during this review. And I will say that if you're into photography, this is an amazing camera, and if anything, it might actually be a stronger photography camera than videography camera. So our camera setups on weddings goes a lot like this. It's usually one camera on a handheld rig, usually an X-T3 with a stabilized wide angle lens, such as the 18-55 kit lens. It's not great for low light, but it is awesome for being able to use stabilization and have the variability of being able to zoom. Camera B would be this camera, usually handheld as well. This would be the one that my fiance uses a lot due to the IBIS. And then she can also use a lens that has a bit of a telephoto on it, so she can get the nice blurry shots and not have to worry about the shakes because of the IBIS. And then camera C would be either on the gimbal or a monopod or a tripod, and that would basically be an X-T3 without any sort of stabilized lens on it, and that would be because it's either stationary or on the gimbal. So that's the setup that we're using at the moment. We'll see what we do during the future, but I'm always recommending the Fuji cameras, especially for videography, because they offer so much awesome video features for the money. So the XH1 can shoot 1080p up to 120 frames a second, and it can also shoot 4K up to 30 frames a second. So not quite as good as the 4K on the X-T3. I also want to say that the Fuji XH1 can only shoot 4K for I think 20 minutes at a time, but I can't remember honestly. That may be with a battery grip, it may not be. It's not usually an issue for us unless we're shooting long clips, and usually ceremonies at weddings don't go longer than an hour, and at that point, even if we were shooting on an X-T3, we would still have to be restarting the recording, so it's not really that big a deal just to go over and hit record one other time. So again, not a big deal. If you're going around shooting a lot of different clips, it's never going to be an issue, because how often are you shooting over 20 minutes when you're just grabbing clips around weddings? So now that I've named some of the things that I love about this camera, I'll give you a few things that I'm not so crazy about. One would be the size. Now, this is an advantage and a disadvantage. It is a chunky boy. It's similar to, like I said, like a normal DSLR, and that's good and it's bad. It's good for ergonomics. It's bad if you're trying to balance it on a gimbal. I have the Ronin SC, and this is pretty much too big for that with the battery grip on it. So I have to take it off really if I want to be able to use the gimbal and use it the way it's intended to be used. Another disadvantage that some people might say about this camera is that it's a crop sensor. Now, I will take a crop sensor with amazing video quality versus a full frame camera with kind of subpar or just okay video specs, but that's just me. But I want to put that out there for those who might be really concerned about it being a crop sensor. Another downside is going to be the battery size. This battery is itty bitty, and you gotta have about, I don't know, 8 to 10 of them if you want to film a whole wedding. At our last wedding, we had 8, and we ended up putting them on the charger and kind of rotating 3 at a time, and we were fine, but it's just something that is a little bit of an annoyance, and I'm glad that they fixed on the X-T4, but if you want this camera, you still gotta deal with it. So this next downside is more for Fuji cameras in general, and that would be that the cameras don't feature any sort of crop guidelines for the different aspect ratios in video. I know that we like to use the 2.35 aspect ratio, and it just doesn't show up on here, and I can't tell you how many shots I accidentally ruin because I'm looking at the screen on the back of the camera and I'm forgetting to account for that squeeze from the crop, and I end up cutting off somebody's head like this, and yeah, that's no fun. But not really a huge deal. I've heard of people actually taking like gaffer's tape and kind of estimating and putting tape on the back of their screen. I would never do that, but yeah, it's an option. What I like is on my display on my monitor that I use for my handheld rig, it does have the crop guidelines, so that helps me out immensely. So now let's get into the autofocus aspect. Now this is always a hot topic with cameras, especially with Canon and Sony kind of dominating the market and having amazing autofocus. And I have some bad news here. The autofocus on pretty much any Fuji camera is not reliable for video. Now, it does have the little box that you can put in the middle of the screen, which is what I'm doing right now on my X-T3 that's recording me. But the downside of that is you have to keep whatever you're trying to keep in focus in the middle of the frame. And sometimes that's perfectly fine, and then other times that's kind of ruining your composition. Sometimes you want to track a subject, and Fuji does not offer any sort of tracking autofocus while you're in video mode. So that's really disappointing, and I'll be honest with you, at times has almost driven me away from the system. But bear with me here, just kind of stay with me. But not having that autofocus that does all the work for you actually will make you a better filmmaker. I promise you it will, and it will actually probably lead to your films looking even better than if you had an amazing autofocus camera. Where you'll need autofocus the most is on a gimbal. That's the one time where I kind of get a bit envious of people who have great autofocus. Say for like example, you're on a gimbal and you want to do like a really cool tracking shot. If the subject is not in the middle of the frame, it can kind of sometimes go in and out of focus, and pulling focus, even if you have a focus wheel on your camera and you're in manual focus, is still pretty challenging, and it's just not ideal. So unfortunately, I would say for the most part, if you're going to be on a gimbal, you have to stick to framing your subject in the middle of the frame. And yeah, it's not ideal, it's not perfect, but it honestly gets the job done like 99% of the time, and it's rarely like a big deal for me, just something I kind of have to work around. But I do want to give you guys the heads up with that in case you're thinking about using this and you're thinking that you want to have autofocus that snaps onto the eye or onto the face and never gets lost, and you want to basically just worry about composition and not have to worry about what the camera's focusing on, then these cameras would not be for you. So why did I say it'll make you a better filmmaker? I said that because it requires you to be more intentional about where you put your focus. It also allows for more professional looking focus pulls and movement of the camera. You don't get any accidental focusing on objects that you didn't want. It sticks to where you set the focus, and it's up to you to maintain that focus. So an example of how you can kind of get around this is if your subject is walking towards you, you just maintain that same distance from them and your subject will always be in focus. Another cool thing about manual focus is it works really well for adding artistic flares into your shots. So if you want to kind of like actually make the person or subject come in and out of focus really smoothly, you can do that simply by just leaning backwards just a little bit or forward, or with the camera push it in and out. Basically, it can add some really cool artistic flair that a lot of people really like. So all this to say that if you need the very best autofocus there is out there, then by all means go with a Sony or a Canon, but just realize you're gonna be making compromises to your video quality unless you step up in price to around that $2,000, $3,000 price bracket. So guys, to sum it up, in 2021, I think that the Fuji XH1 is a very, very usable camera for professional video and photography. I think that you can't go wrong for the price, for all the features that are included, amazing build quality, amazing video. You're not gonna go wrong, and I promise you, you're gonna enjoy using this camera, and it's gonna give you some amazing looking videos for your clients. So that's gonna be it for this video, guys. I really appreciate it if you stuck around to the end. Leave me a comment down below if you want to talk about anything, if you have any questions, or you want any sort of help kind of picking out a camera that fits your needs. I'd love to connect with you guys. Subscribe to the channel if you like what you see so far. I know it's only going to get better from here, and go check out some of the other videos that I've already done. But until the next video, guys, have a great day, and I'll see you next time.